Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, Wes Moore sworn in as Maryland's first African-American governor. Montgomery County residents call for more policing during White Oak listening session. And Delegate Juli Palakovitch Carr and Councilmember Jawando proposed changes to state law which would raise income taxes for some Montgomery County residents. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former Maryland Delegate Maricé Morales and Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. Takoma Park, Maryland native Wes Moore was sworn in on Wednesday, January 18th, as Maryland's 63rd governor. Governor Moore is only the third African-American elected to the position of governor in the history of the United States. That such an accomplishment would be recognized during the same week that civil rights icon Reverend Martin Luther King is honored is an achievement for all Marylanders and for all Americans. Also sworn in on Wednesday as lieutenant governor was Aruna Miller, the first woman and Asian American to hold that august office. Maricé, what is the most significant aspect of Mr. Moore being sworn in?
Well, we are celebrating Wes's, obviously, inauguration. He is one of only 3 Black governors in the whole nation. And we saw kind of, just a slew of some famous people come through. Oprah introduced him, and what I thought was really heartwarming from his speech was really kind of addressing, the fact that our country is still a place where your parents can immigrate and you can become the next governor. And so he highlighted both his mother and also Aruna's mother, Wes's mother being from Jamaica and Aruna's mother being from India. So it was really a wonderful swearing in ceremony. And I thought it really gave a lot of hope on the bipartisanship as well that he's bringing back to Annapolis.
Well, thank you. Mark, Governor Moore comes into office with some very high expectations. I mean, my goodness, Bloomberg News has been touting him as a future presidential contender even before he was sworn in. That is a very, very high bar to clear.
Well, that certainly does raise expectations, and with all respect to the new governor, Maryland's a tough state to run for president from. Obviously, ask President O'Malley and President Delaney. Maybe it's the curse of Spiro Agnew. Look, I think he appropriately will be focusing on being the best governor he can during the next couple of years, and let the future take care of itself.
Well, there's certainly an article by Colbert King in today's Washington Post that says, now that you have been sworn in, it's time to govern. It'll be a big test. Right. So Maricé, following up on that, in Governor Moore's acceptance speech that followed, it followed his theme from his campaign, particularly in how he wants to diminish the existing 8-to-1 racial wealth gap. There's no specifics. How do you think he's going to try to achieve that?
So he's talked about the unfair appraisals of, properties in historically red line neighborhoods. So he wants to address that. We know that, home ownership is the best way to create generational wealth. He also has talked about accelerating the minimum wage. It's set to be up to $15 in the state of Maryland by 2025. His plan is to make that, come about sooner. It's also my understanding that he's going to be focusing on entrepreneurial incentives, but also within the school system, preparing our students, our future workforce to not only be employees, but to become employers and entrepreneurs themselves, focusing on, and some of the funding may come from, different sources, but focusing on minority and women-owned businesses as well as veterans-owned businesses. So I think he has, a pretty a robust plan there, and I think he's going to be well supported by the General Assembly.
Well, we certainly hope so. Mark, I want to switch gears away from economics for a moment, the governor also envisions changes in the criminal justice system, which according to Governor Moore, incarcerates more Black boys than any other state in the country, and trying to make Maryland safe, but also a just state.
Well, and I think his numbers were off in terms of the incarceration rate. There are other states, I think Wisconsin was pointed out as being one that was higher. Listen, this is a very important public policy area, criminal justice in Maryland. I was concerned about the starting point for that. I would start by focusing on the victims. And I appreciate that those who get arrested are victims of sorts, but we have an extraordinary murder rate in Baltimore that needs to get reversed. And there are concrete ideas that involve making sure that people who commit crimes with guns, and the laws are on the books, are appropriately prosecuted when they commit crimes. Maryland Public Policy did some great research that tracked people who had been arrested by homicide, what their history was, and had they been fully prosecuted for their prior crimes with guns and violent crimes, they wouldn't have been on the street, and hopefully those murders would not have taken place. So we've got a lot of work to do in improving that criminal justice system in Maryland, but in Baltimore in particular.
Casey, if I could chime in just for a second. So I would say that, and Wes has said this on the campaign trail. He said it when he's interviewed. I think he really gets it. It's really more of a three-pronged approach. Understanding. I understand your issue with the incarceration rates, but there is a distinction between Black incarcerated folks versus boys. So what, and this is from my time when I was on judiciary, Maryland has the top numbers in terms of charging juveniles as adults and then being treated and incarcerated as adult Black men. And so then that is a distinction that dealing with the Wisconsin issue. But also, I think I think Wes does appreciate the issue around the low morale around law enforcement, and he definitely has a vision for that. He met with former Delegate Eric Barron that I served with, assistant attorney, obviously at the federal level, and then also with Attorney General Anthony Brown. So I think there are plans, and I sit on the committee for public safety. And then the other approach is really focusing on our youth, focusing on our students, making sure that young people are not on the streets without not anything to do, and inspiring the next generation of law enforcement officers that were, born and raised in the communities that they will serve. He also talked about a program immediately after high school to serve the state in the capacity of, it could be through, as a police officer, any, nurses, any of the paramedics. The whole point behind this initiative is to really inspire young people to serve the state of Maryland in the areas that we're really kind of lacking. And I would say that law enforcement morale is at the top of the list.
Well, we have to go to a quick exit question because we're running out of time for this segment. So, Mark, outgoing Governor Larry Hogan exits office with a 77% approval rating. Pretty nice. Anybody would like to have that. Will Governor Moore be as popular at the end of his term?
I certainly hope so for all our sakes. And I think it has to do with being a governor that strikes a balance, a middle course that involves all Marylanders and frankly rejects the advice of the extremes on both sides.
And Maricé, your wrap up there.
I agree. I think, and he said it, that was really much the tone of his speech. And I thought it was a beautiful analogy to his time in Afghanistan. And he said, when I had to work with, I was a captain and I had my unit, I didn't care about what your political affiliation was. It's really the goal is to get the job done. And that is, doing it in a bipartisan manner.
I think that's what many Marylanders are hopeful and expect from our newly inaugurated governor. When we come back from this short break, Montgomery County residents are calling for more policing during their White Oak listening session last week. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Public safety was on the mind of most people who gathered in White Oak this week to discuss the need for improved policing prompted by two high-profile homicides in Silver Spring, which occurred in December. The police and the politicos met with the public to discuss the growing perception and the feeling of unease in Montgomery County over the rising crime rate. According to Councilmember Kristen Mink, firearm-related violence in White Oak increased by 41% in 2021, but an additional 20% on top of that in 2022. Shocking statistics. Maricé, you just mentioned you're on the Public Safety Commission, so you're familiar with these topics. In 2020, the County Council reduced the police department budget by $8.5 million. And in 2021, Bethesda Beat reported that Montgomery County Police Department has had difficulty in filling its ranks due to poor pay, the pandemic, and most strongly, there's a growing anti-police sentiment. So what can be done to make people feel safe again?
So just a quick clarification. So I'm on the Public Safety Committee for the Moore administration, not the county.
Okay, well.
But that said, I have always said you get what you pay for. Montgomery County Police Department, we have the lowest budget for any first year recruited officers in the whole DMV area. I think that the public would agree. We want our officers that are out, putting their life on the line for us to be compensated as such and to be respected. And I think that that's, having any kind of decrease to the budget, like I said, the morale is already low. I personally met with the president of the FOP. He is a millennial, he's young, he has really kind of modern ideas and really welcomes diversity. So I think it's more so what we need is a culture shift rather than, telling law enforcement officers that we don't have their backs. So I think that individuals like, that were present at the public hearing over at White Oak, they need to continue to hold those so that our leaders can hear them fully. Because, the campaign trail really changes some of the tunes that people were talking about. And now that they're kind of like sitting in the job, now they actually have to, smell the roses and really have a realistic view of what's happening in Montgomery County and in the state in general.
So, but I want to follow up just a little bit on that because Maricé, certainly in the past 2 years, the General Assembly and here in Montgomery County, there have been changes in laws, particularly with police immunity and the ability to have citizens, file charges and claims against police officers that undermines that same, message that the government has the back of the police community.
So Montgomery County actually had that model from the beginning. So we, at the state level, we actually modeled it after what had been working with the county. And it's something that it was written within the labor agreements between the FOP and the county, and when it comes to some of the state court issues with police immunity, we're really codifying something that was really part of case law. So I think a lot of times we get kind of stuck in, propaganda, and even some council members, I would say, have touted their own horns, claiming success, when really it was something that Montgomery County Police had already done in the past, and we codified it at the state level.
Okay, so Mark, rightly or wrongly, there is this perception generally that there's an anti-police sentiment by many politicians. And Peter Moskos, a former Baltimore police officer now teaching at John Jay College, commented on this anti-police sentiment and had these observations. He said, "Congratulations, you've increased the Black murder rate. You've given Black worse policing through the transfer of cops and retirements, and doing it smugly in the name of racial justice. So is it possible to accomplish Governor Moore's goals of police forces moving with appropriate intensity, integrity, and accountability?"
Well, I certainly hope so. Let me just kind of respond to it. First of all, I think Maricé referenced the fact that jurisdictions across the board are having trouble recruiting police officers. This is a common problem across the board. Certainly Montgomery County is having that issue. but other jurisdictions are as well. And I think, as you described, it reflects a change in attitudes towards law enforcement in general as a result of the last couple of years. And that's a challenge, and it's a challenge in particular, not just filling positions, but filling positions with people who are, dedicated to law enforcement, who are trained and respond and develop it as professionals. So that is,
I mean, not to interrupt, we have but
sure.
The Bethesda Beat, when they reported on the recruitment issue, said that there were 248 that applied for the police academy and only 17 matriculated to being officers. That's a terrible situation.
And that I think in many of those cases there were other jurisdictions that picked up those officers, and so that's this is a sort of longer term challenge that we're having, sort of as a fallout of the last couple of years of attracting the people we need to become police officers.
All right, so well, thank you both. That was a great discussion on a very touchy topic, but one that is very important for the safety of all Montgomery County residents. Now I want to turn to something that's going on in the General Assembly. In 2021, the General Assembly passed a bill that was put into law over the veto of Governor Hogan, which would allow Maryland counties to set up progressive tax brackets. Up to this point, we had a flat tax by the counties as to what they could tax the residents. Now, this week, Delegate Juli Palakovitch Carr and Montgomery County Council member Will Jawando proposed a further change to the tax law, which would increase the maximum Maryland tax rate from 3.2% to 3.7%. Maricé, is it possible to tax for lower income people without raising taxes for higher income people? We just saw that Frederick County introduced a progressive tax, but didn't increase the higher tax rate.
First of all, I mean, our my former colleague, they can propose legislation that they would like. I think really what we need to be paying attention to is it going to be part of a leadership package? I would say humbly that it will not, especially with the recent reforms. The state legislature is known for kind of being, kind of moving in almost like a molasses kind of state, so when we just went through some reforms, I really would find it very hard to believe that bill really finds its way anywhere. Now, it's a good discussion to have, but I think we can be confident about a steady kind of tax base for now.
Well, I mean, but this is the problem, and this is the problem with perception, that when you have your representatives who from the delegate Montgomery County delegation and the Montgomery County Council calling for higher taxes, what is the perception when you have a competitive tax market for people to reside in? Mark, if Palakovitch and the Jawando proposal is adopted, the combined state and local Maryland tax rate will increase to 9.45%, compared to Virginia, where their combined tax rate is 5.75%, Delaware, which is 6.6%, and neighboring West Virginia is 6.5%. Only DC would have a higher tax rate at 9.75%. Someone looking to reside in Montgomery County who may be a high earner may think twice about moving to Maryland. What do you think?
And absolutely, and I think it's worth noting that other jurisdictions are going the opposite direction. Legislation is moving in West Virginia to cut their income tax rate in half. So the 6.5 would go to 3.25. It hasn't gone through yet. We live in a very competitive federal system, and people, particularly with being able to work virtually, are in a position to move where they want to be. And we're seeing in high tax jurisdictions, New York and California, losing people, but particularly losing higher income people. And that's really significant in that the top 1% pay more in income tax. They pay about roughly 35-40% of the overall tax burden. They actually pay more than the bottom 90% in total. What this means is that collectively, all our jurisdictions that have income taxes are highly dependent on being able to keep those higher income people in the jurisdiction. And if you push them away, you end up having to figure out another way to levy your tax burden and pay for services. In the past, a lot of our leaders, when they kind of sat down and looked at the numbers, have been very careful about realizing that we are in this competitive situation. And I certainly hope you're right that we're not going to see that, particularly, I might say, when we have at the state level such a large surplus.
So Mark and Maricé, I thought, Mark, you were going to mention the millionaire's tax that was imposed,
and that's a good
was
reference
imposed during the O'Malley administration, which was a total disaster. But I also want to bring out, and I don't want to blindside either one of you, because I just learned this morning. There's a bill that Juli Palakovitch Carr is also expected to introduce, which would increase tax on the top 1% earners, not only on their income tax, but on certain capital gains. There's also a proposal that would change the inheritance tax laws, reducing the amount that's exempt from 5 million to $1 million. So Maricé, I'll let you have the last word on this. Are we, as Mark is suggesting, is it possible that we're going to tax ourselves into a problem where we're going to have less revenue by changing taxes?
I don't have a problem with, getting people to pay their fair share. Let's be clear with that. So, exploring, what that would do economically, et cetera. We have, data analysts and the legislature that do that for us in bill drafting. I think making a comparison to the second poorest state in the nation, West Virginia, is not comparing apples to apples. And I would say, to add on to that is, the state of Maryland, we have a surplus. And the Moore administration has talked about the $69 million that he is focusing on in terms of the next year's budget. This surplus, some of it is also, because of the previous administration, but a lot of it is, it's a result of federal funds from our Recovery Act. So, we're expected to be using these funds to get the Maryland economy back on its feet. So, when it comes to paying a fair share, I really don't have a problem with that. I don't know that we're anywhere near that right now, but having that conversation, I think educates us all.
Well, we're in the very beginning of the General Assembly. We'll have to wait and see. We'll see if your prediction that this leadership doesn't favor this or not. We'll find out. That's what we're here for every week. We're going to take another break. Stay tuned for Parting Shots. And welcome back. Now with Parting Shots, Maricé Morales.
Just want to again congratulate our first Black governor, our first Indian lieutenant governor. We have Wes Moore, Aruna Miller. Couldn't be more proud to have served with Aruna, and also one of my longtime friends, our new comptroller, Brooke Learman. I think she's going to be phenomenal, and I just am so excited for all of them.
Thank you, Maricé. Mark Uncapher, your parting shot.
Well, I have to echo what Maricé has said. I think inaugurations are, times we're seeing the pendulum shift in Maryland, and policies are moving in a different direction. That said, ours is a state that has always kind of been most successful when we had a balance, and we kind of found the middle ground between different points of view. And I'm encouraged by the governor's remarks and hope that he follows through.
Thank you. I want to reflect on the inauguration of Governor Wes Moore. I think it's a wonderful thing, not only for all Marylanders, that we are hopefully in a colorblind society. Governor Moore won by an astounding number of votes over his opponent. That shows that people of good character, people of high morals are going to receive the support of all of the public. And I certainly wish him all the best. I hope he has the leadership attributes that he learned in the military and has professed. He certainly seems to to bear them well. And I wish we all can look forward to 4 years of prosperity with his administration. I want to thank both Mark and Maricé for being here today. It's wonderful that you sacrifice your time to contribute to the public dialogue. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.